Excellent. Hi, everybody. Can people hear me? Can you see the first slide of the webinar? Please do type into the question box, just so that we know that you're there. Okay, we'll give it about a minute or so for more people to sort of join us. So if you can type in and just to say hello, that would be brilliant. Okay, so we have a few people signed up, and I think what we'll do is we'll give it a go. We'll kick off. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for connecting with us. My name is Mario Mustras. I'm a chartered chemist, coach, and a trainer, but I'm here in my capacity as chair of the Royal Society of Chemistry Management Group, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to our Management Group webinar. This is part of a series of webinars focusing on leadership. So just to get the interactivity going, can you type into the question box, say hello to us with your first name, and do let us know where you're all from. So which city, which region, or even which country. So do type that into the question box. I will give you a few seconds to answer. So can everyone hear? Can everyone see? Not had any responses so far, so just want to check that you're all out there. Brilliant. We've got Andy from Loughborough. Thank you, Andy. Hello. We've got Marcia from London. Hi, Marcia. Excellent. So I think we've got a few people online. So I think what we'll do is we'll move forward. So thank you for that. So I'm delighted to be presenting this webinar to you. But before I move on, I just want to mention the format of our webinar. I will run through what we're doing in the next few minutes, but our presenter, Clare Viney, will present for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and she would welcome interaction with you. So just as you're typing into the box here, she would welcome that interaction either during the presentation, but we will have a Q&A session right at the end so that you can ask Clare any questions. We have Stephanie on hand, who's dealing with all the technical issues, and she's running the webinar at the Cambridge office within the Royal Society of Chemistry. So I'm really pleased. Let's just go straight into introduce Clare. So I'm really pleased to present Clare Viney, who I've had the pleasure of working with in my previous career. Clare is the Chief Executive of CRAC, the Career Development Organisation within the UK for universities and beyond. And they manage an organisation called Vitae, who are a global leader in supporting professional development of researchers. So I'm going to let Clare talk a bit more about CRAC and Vitae a bit later on. And the other thing I should mention to you is that this talk is being recorded, and we will send you a web link for the recording within the next week or so. So there will also be polls throughout the webinar, and I would encourage you to answer them as they pop up. So let's start with a quick one right now and find out if you're a member of the Royal Society of Chemistry. So you should see the poll light up there in front of you. So do let us know. Do select a category, and do let us know if you're a member of the management group, if you're a member of the Royal Society of Chemistry, if you're a non-member. Do let us know. I'll give you a few seconds to answer. So Stephanie, if you can hit the stop button on the poll, we'll find out the results. So I know 80% of you answered, so thank you for that. We've got quite a few members who are not members of the Royal Society of Chemistry Management Group, but who are members of the RSC. And it looks like you're all members of the Royal Society of Chemistry, so which is really good to see. So let's bring up another poll just to find out and a bit more about you, so we can further gauge the sort of the presentation. So the next poll looks at whether you are an academic member of staff, whether you're a student, whether you're in business. Do hit the button. And I'll give you a few seconds just to bring that up. Okay, great. And I think what we'll do is we'll close the poll now. And really, really interesting. Just as I suspected, quite a few of you are students or academic staff, some of you in business. So great. Thank you for that. That is really good to know, really good for Claire to know as well. So without further ado, I am delighted to be able to ask Claire to start her talk on leadership in higher education, realizing the potential of researchers. So Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Mario. Well, hello from sunny Cambridge. So as Mario mentioned, I've got about 30 minutes, hopefully maybe not that long, just to run through some of the highlights of what we do. So Vitae is the program and brand that we deliver in higher education. We've been working, well, CRAC, the parent charity, has been around since 1964, and we essentially do a lot of research and intelligence around career transition points and career decision making. The work we do in higher education is all done through Vitae, and we've been doing that for nearly 50 years. So we know quite a lot about researchers, what makes them tick, how to develop them, and in essence, help them realise their potential. So over the next 30 or so minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are and how we work. We've worked extensively with the Royal Society of Chemistry over the years. When I worked at the RSC prior to being chief exec of CRAC, I was with the RSC for 16 years, and we'd supported and worked with Vitae over a number of different projects and years. Some of the things that are really driving the activity that we're doing at the moment is thinking about preparing researchers for the future and the possible futures, because obviously there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of flux within higher education, not just here in the UK, but Europe and beyond. And the changes in research cultures, what behaviours and mindsets do we need to instill in our young researchers so that as they move from early career to mid-career, what are the building blocks that we need to put in place to ensure that we have the best leaders that we can to drive forward, not just the science, but also the cultures and the structures that we need. Here in the UK, as I say, we're obviously thinking hard about how we remain at that world leading edge position in research and innovation, and I'll touch on some of that. And a little bit about learning from other sectors. This is really important because there are so many things that we can learn from beyond academia, beyond higher education, that we can bring back to the development of our researchers. And then hopefully at the end, we'll have lots of time for questions. So who we are and what we do. So we are truly international. We operate with or work with about 200 universities in 20 different countries. And we want to build human capital by influencing the development and implementation of effective policy. So this is really the macro level that we work at. So we want to ensure that we have the policy structures in place to support not just the research, but the researchers. So let's focus on the people. We need to enhance the higher education provision. So we need to ensure that the skills and talents that are being developed are fit for purpose. So Mario mentioned that some of you are currently students and researchers. Obviously, some of you are academic staff, so you're within higher education, but those of you in industry are the employers of these future researchers. And everything that we do at CRAC and at Vitae is about empowering the individual to make informed choices. So we do quite a lot of research, and some of which I'll talk about later, on career destinations, where people, obviously where people go and why they make those decisions. And then in terms of evidence, we bring all of that together and benchmarking, looking at why should individuals and universities and institutions bother with professional and career development. Having worked at the RSC for 16 years, I know how important continuing professional development is to enhancing and developing your career. And I have this sort of phrase about hiding the vegetables, that a bit like with, in all bits of our lives, you have to do things that perhaps you may or may not always think about. And we know it's good for us to eat vegetables, just like professional development is good for us, because being the best that we can be is really important. So how do we actually work? So we're small. I mean, the organisation that I lead is 15 full-time staff, but we work with something like 40 to 50 associates who help us develop and deliver, not just here in the UK, but across Europe. Our biggest markets outside of the UK at the moment are Ireland, Spain, and Poland. And in Poland, it's very much driven from a government perspective. In Spain, we're supporting a number of research funders, so we work very closely with the funders. And we've also been doing some work in Africa recently as well, and I'll touch on that in a minute. So we work at the, as I mentioned, at the macro level, at the policy level, and right in the middle of the slide, we have the Concordat to support the career development of researchers. So this is it's 10 years old this year, so there's a big review going on of the Concordat, and over 100 institutions and universities in the UK have signed up to the Concordat. And in essence, it covers the 7 principles of being a good employer of researchers. It covers everything from equality and diversity through to good recruitment and retention practices. The way that we measure universities' progress towards the Concordat is something called the HR Excellence in Research. And when we launched the Concordat 10 years ago, researchers and people were not mentioned in most research-intensive university strategies. That's not the case now. 10 years ago, only 30% had any kind of performance review and appraisal. It's now nearer 70. So we've still got a long way to go, but actually the academic environment and valuing the people has changed over the last 10 years. We support the UK Research Staff Association. As I mentioned, we work with 140 UK institutions. We've got 9 institutions in Ireland, and then about 200 globally. And we, through initiatives like Every Researcher Counts, which was funded by HEFCE, which is now Research England, and the research councils, we bring together, in a sort of non-competitive way, bring together lots of our members and universities around a common theme to share best practice and try and drive change. Pearls and Cross, so Pearls is the Principal Investigators and Research Leaders Survey. 8,000 supervisors and research leaders took part in that survey last year, and there was a huge amount of data and evidence to suggest that things are changing. PIs and research leaders do feel supported, but there's still a long way to go. And the research culture and actually how we reward and recognise good performance and good research practices there's still a debate to be had. Cross is the careers research online survey, so that is a really interesting benchmarking survey that we do every other year with over 60 institutions and just over 5,000 research staff. Staggeringly, 80% of postdocs and research staff in the UK want and aspire to become an academic. 60% truly believe that they will become an academic, but we know that the reality is that it will be probably fewer than 10%, maybe in some disciplines and areas fewer than 5%. So there is something about our academic culture that points and pushes our researchers to only think about a career and path in academia. And I mentioned earlier about the career development organisation CRAC, and this is the parent charity. And as I say, we have a lot of expertise in doing research, looking at everything from motivations of why people make those why they make those career decisions, and we have some expertise around higher education. So I briefly mentioned some of the work that we've been doing in Africa recently in collaboration with the Association of Commonwealth Universities, working with 29 universities across 9 different countries, looking at how to build institutional strength, strategies and capacity building and research strength in those universities. As I say, that was mentioned, that was funded by DFID, so it was a really interesting insight into African science. It was all around climate change, and we learned a lot, because in Africa actually the role of who is the expert is really interesting, because actually if you're looking at farming and fisheries and the impact of climate change, the fisherman is the expert, not necessarily the academic who might be sitting hundreds of miles away in their research lab. So there are some really interesting insights that we can get for our UK community from working internationally and collaborating. A lot of what we do is about experiential learning. It's about taking researchers through a journey, getting them to understand themselves, joining up the resources that we have and that we can tap into from our members. And every year we bring together through our Vitae International Conference around 425 practitioners. So these are the researcher developers. These are the people within institutions who drive the support of the researchers and who support the institutional strategies. And so our community is very collaborative. A lot of sharing goes on, and we learn from each other, and Vitae is obviously a conduit to that. Just a little bit about the global perspective. So there are around 8 million researchers globally. And actually today in the UK, we believe there are around 110,000 postgraduates currently today, and about 43,000 postdocs and research staff. So it's a huge population. The European Union has about 22% of researchers, and obviously post-Brexit there are some concerns about how we will access talent, and certainly I'll come on to that. We'll talk a little bit about the UK policy context. But the knowledge economy and how policy drives that excellent research and the competition and war for talent is really important. So every country is increasing the amount of spend in research and development. And I visit a lot of universities in the UK, and every single one of them is looking at some kind of plan for growth. And our doctoral students or doctoral researchers and our research staff are the engines of our universities. So, they drive the science, they drive the cutting edge science. And so there is this mismatch in some ways of expectations, but in terms of the reality that we need those researchers to be absolutely flexible, whether they stay in academia or go beyond academia. We need to have the building blocks in place to ensure that they are our leaders of the future. So what might that look like? And this is a big debate amongst our community. So the massification of research and development. So say you're a big research intensive university, whether it's here, whether it's in the US or in Japan. One of the challenges is how do you reach thousands of researchers, and the massification of delivering skills and development training to your researchers at the right time, at the right place. And there's lots of developments in blended learning, but it's not as common as it is in the undergraduate space. One of the things that we're trying to do is to look at how we broaden researcher competencies, and I'll come on to some of the things that we believe are important in terms of competencies that all of us need to think about in this ever-changing, completely dynamic world. One of the challenges that all of us have, and many researchers have, is that emotional intelligence, so your self-awareness, how you work with others, and what that might mean in a leadership context, has become more and more important. Whether you stay in academia or go beyond academia, having high emotional intelligence is extremely important. And by getting more exposure to other environments, it helps you understand where the challenges and opportunities might be, not just in a research context, but obviously also in a sort of broader context. My colleague Janet, Janet Metcalf, who's been working in research and development for 25 years now, uses this phrase intellectually mobile. And I think it's really important that we think about our, all researchers as flexible, agile, and open to, thinking and behaving differently, embracing new problems, taking the fundamentals that you learn in your higher education career, and then how you might apply those in different contexts and concepts. And that agility and that ability to adapt to those unknown futures is really, really important. And I know that came out through the Royal Society of Chemistry's Future of the Chemical Sciences work, where actually most employers, whether you're in higher education or not, want a workforce that will embrace change and know and be prepared for that change. So again, what might that be in a leadership context? And I'll come on to that in a little while. As I say, collaborative working, global challenges, the increase in public accountability when it comes to funding is, these are things that in the last 20 years have become more prevalent. The responsible research and innovation agenda, which has come from top down from the European Commission, has again been driving the spotlight on things like public engagement. Open research doesn't just mean open access, mean openness in terms of sharing data, sharing results, sharing that sort of collaborating in its broadest sense, bringing together cross-functional teams, which again, in industry is the norm. In terms of research ethics, I think there are some disciplines where ethics of obviously the science is moving at such a pace that the ethical approaches, some universities are struggling to have structures in place to be able to keep up at pace with the way that the science is moving. But we've certainly seen an increase in demand from researchers who are thinking about the research ethics, and that's sometimes about how they frame their research question, but it's also about the interpretation of data and how you might overlay ethics onto that. And a modern researcher needs to think about their personal brand and their digital identity. How we measure impact is really important, and impact and outcomes of research has changed massively over the last 5 to 10 years. So again, we've seen an increase in demand for our own webinars about digital brand and about how you might present yourself in a social media context. And we work closely with some of the really big social media gurus like the Thesis Whisperer and Hugh Kearns, who are delivering content and support to researchers using Twitter in a way that we couldn't have dreamt about 10 years ago. So I think there are researchers. The research experience, certainly the postgraduate experience, can be isolating, and so using social media to connect people who come together around a common cause or common interest is really important. And certainly using blended learning, so using virtual and combination of virtual and face-to-face learning. Some institutions have found that this has really helped to embed professional development and actually get researchers to engage with professional development in bite-sized chunks, rather than at the panic, I'm near the end of my contract or I'm near the end of my PhD and oh my goodness, what do I need to do? I need to get a CV, I need to get a job, or now I need to start thinking about a grant writing course because I'm near the end. So again, there's lots of different challenges in the research environment, and the competition for positions, so academic positions, and also the variety of opportunities out there mean that we're working very closely with our members and the community to ensure that we're supporting researchers. So everything that we do is built around something called the Researcher Development Framework. And what do we think a good researcher looks like? Well, is it this lady here? Do you think it's this researcher here who's obviously in the library? Yes, that is a library with online access. I'm not sure how many people go to the library these days. Or are these really, are these good researchers? I'm not sure they're actually great researchers, because if it takes 4 of you to look at a computer screen, then perhaps they're not as good as we think they might be. But actually, we do know what a good researcher looks like. This is our Researcher Development Framework, and it guides everything that we do here at Vitae. So it's the 63 knowledge, skills, behaviours and attributes that we believe a good researcher needs to acquire or use in their research context. And it covers, behind this wheel of fortune, as I like to call it, sits a number of levels. So what we have done is looked at how you might move, and if I just pick one around critical thinking, there are 5 levels that sit behind that attribute, and we can support researchers to do training needs analysis to understand, well, I'm at level 1 and I need to be at level 4 because when I want to go and become a patent lawyer, critical thinking will be really important, and I need to move my skills through these different, and we have all sorts of resources and courses that will help them to do that. What we have done in conjunction with the Royal Society of Chemistry is actually take these knowledge, behaviours and attributes and map them onto the 12 attributes of chartered chemist, and that's been really, really interesting. Through Toby Underwood, who's the manager of accreditation at RSC, and also his colleagues at the Institute of Physics and the Royal Society of Biology, we've been looking at how we might recognise and accredit research training at things like CDTs, the Centres for Doctoral Training. So, you know, sometimes you might start with a chemistry degree, you might actually start to nudge more towards biochemistry, and you might end up in bioengineering. And what the RDF does is help you move through the different professional development and competencies, which can help that whole sort of what does a professional researcher look like. And beyond STEM, there are less well organised frameworks and structures in social sciences and arts and humanities. So this is something that we're working with the community to look at. Obviously today we're focusing on leadership. So leadership is about challenge, it's about getting the best out of yourself and the people that are around you. It's about challenging yourself and others to do what's right and not just what's easy. And it's about challenging influence when you have no power. So very often, you know, in a research context, you'll be working in collaborative teams. And how do you sort of share knowledge, share information, and how do you instill a sort of a leadership culture? And what we did in conjunction with the Leadership Foundation for Higher Education, which is now part of Advanced HE, is to look at what are the specific knowledge, skills and attributes that we believe make up a good leader. So this is on our website, and there is a link from the on the presentation bottom right. But if you go to the Vitae website, you'll be able to access the basic RDF. But the leadership lens is there, and actually my email address is right at the end. So if you have any questions, or if you want me to send you a link, I can do. But the so what we've done is overlay a lens on the RDF, because 63 is way too many knowledge, skills and attributes to be worrying about, and we've focused in if you see in bold, so to be a good leader, you need to think about team working, you need to think about people management and influence and leadership and collaboration, you know, public engagement, enterprise policy. So these are the sorts of attributes, and then using the techniques and skills and tools that we have to take researchers through the process of, okay, well, I am here and I need to be here. So how do I get from A to B, from level 1 to level 5? And we use this framework to build training programs that we then take out into, mostly into academic context, although we work with a number of research institutes as well. And so, and research companies, just to think about, okay, well, what is it that we want to instill in our researchers, and what does leadership mean to us and to them? I'm going to move on to the touch points between academia and industry, because I think, you know, we learn a lot from employers about what makes a good researcher, what you know, what do employers really want and need, and we are leading a European project called EURAX IND, which is funded through the EURAXIS, which is the university network across Europe, called EURAX IND, and it's all about outreach into industry. So that touch point between university and business. And there were 4 areas that we concentrated on: what researchers believe they were good at, what researchers think employers want, and what employers say they need, and then what institutions believe to be top employable skills. So this is all relatively new research, and so there's a poll coming up as well, so it'd be really interesting to see how your views match those from the 600 or so employers that we polled across Europe. So as I mentioned, nearly 80% of those, roughly, so it's in line with the results that we got from the survey here in the UK of research staff. About 80% of researchers believe they want a long-term academic career, but 60% would consider working outside, but the vast majority of those, 70%, still want to do research, which again, you know, is not was not a surprise. 37% possibly in research and grant management, and 35% in research or science policy. But nearly 2/3 think it would be hard to get a non-research job in business. And actually there's quite a lot of evidence out there that employers don't necessarily understand the skills that researchers develop during a research training. And that's partly, I think, due to researchers not necessarily demonstrating those skills. And less than 30% think businesses value what researchers offer working in non-research roles. The reality is that most researchers' interaction with business is very low. Only 28% have done joint research, 27% have done consultancy, and I know a lot of higher education institutes are looking at how they use postdocs in particular, so highly trained researchers, to essentially become consultants. There are lots of barriers perceived, some around IP, some around, whether there's a true, how you develop a true, deep and meaningful relationship between university and industry is some universities have done it very, very well. Researchers are less confident about presenting those non-research skills. So the sorts of things that leaders need in terms of people skills, commercial skills, and they're less confident in interviews and selection and getting good references. That they don't necessarily think about the examples that they have. So very often researchers do have lots of these examples, but they just don't necessarily either translate them or think about them and then present them to employers in a way that they would feel confident about. This is a survey, this is the results from the employer's side. So it sort of mirrors that actually researchers evidence their research skills and experience very well. In the green box, their professional effectiveness, their self-management and time management, but actually the people skills and communication skills are very poorly demonstrated and evidenced. And that's something that we can work on. And researcher development is really about that. What we know is that many researchers lack confidence. And so how do we put in place support and training to raise confidence and to think about, well, perhaps, maybe an internship or some kind of temporary sector mobility, would these things help? So it will be interesting to see, Steph, we're going to switch to the poll. Oh, excellent. So Steph's now opened the poll. So it'd be really good if you've got a list of skills, and it would be good to understand from you what you believe are important, and just to see if that mirrors some of the results that we've got. So I'll just give you a few seconds so that you can click. Okay. Right, Steph, do you want to close the poll now and see what the results are? Okay, so thank you. 3/4 of you responded. Mario, are you able to see the results?
Yes, so really interesting actually. So the top two are innovation and emotional intelligence. Sorry, I didn't see that. The top one is leadership with 44%, then followed by innovation and emotional intelligence, and then followed by project management. Interestingly, business awareness didn't score.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so if we just switch to the results, so this was 600 or so employers and what they most valued in their highly skilled researcher workforce. So emotional intelligence and research skills scored very highly. They obviously value researchers for those research skills, as we've already just talked about. innovation, very poorly. So that was the areas that PhDs did not demonstrate when they were making applications beyond academia, so jobs that were outside of academia, which is interesting because obviously that featured highly on the poll. In terms of messages for the researchers, you know, how motivation is clearly, and self-confidence, flexibility and agility are clearly areas where researchers need to think about how they demonstrate and evidence. So what are the specific activities that they've taken part in that would actually demonstrate that? They will have done it, it's just a confidence about how they present it. And sometimes I actually think it's about the language that we use. So yeah, that was quite interesting. So actually we're still pulling together a lot of the results. This Euraccent project finishes in the end of this month, and the results will be a big toolkit that everyone will be able to use. There will be all sorts of, obviously, evidence-based, so there's an underpinning set of research, and the really big things that have come out are the knowledge of opportunities. Researchers in higher education, whether that's in the UK or well, it's actually across Europe, just do not know what the opportunities are that are out there. We as a community need to look at greater recognition of that intersectoral mobility. So, you know, being able to go into and out of academia at different points in your career will help you be a better researcher wherever you end up. And then there is a big job here in terms of supporting employers to understand the skills that are valued outside of, you know, in academia. So there's a piece here around what is a professional researcher, and actually I think chartered status it could be really key here. So, and that's sort of more training and skills. So the picture is very rosy, certainly in the UK and Ireland, because universities have research and development functions. They spend a lot of time and money supporting researchers. They don't reach everyone, which is a challenge. But as you go across Europe, the adoption of research leadership and research skills and the amount of emphasis, so in some particular countries, some of the programs that we're running in Poland, it's compulsory. That doesn't happen here in the UK. It's very much a carrot approach. In Spain, the work that we do, that's all very, you know, it's very much about supporting and empowering the individual. So again, the research cultures across different parts of Europe, and we have to work out what research and development means in those different contexts. I'm going to quickly skip through the policy developments, because one of the things that I mentioned is obviously there's a big state of you know, flux and change. The formation of UKRI, we've been involved in their talent and skills strategy development. So what's really interesting for us is that Innovate UK, now it's partnered with the research councils and Research England, is looking at, well, what are the building blocks, leadership building blocks that we might need for future innovators. So I think there's a real opportunity to join up the talent and skills strategy across those different government departments here in the UK. I mentioned that we have the independent review of the Concordat, so that's looking at how we support researchers. That will report hopefully in June. There's the introduction of an academic apprenticeship. I mean, I'd need 25 minutes just to even explain it. Essentially, the apprenticeship levy has been introduced here in England, and we've been working with the Higher Education Academy, as was, but it's now the leadership, Advanced HE, looking at what does an academic apprenticeship look like. Obviously, Brexit, everyone is, you know, thinking about what it might mean in terms of talent and skills, and how we project to the outside world that the UK is open for business and that we want the brightest and best to come and work here and research here. And then there is, so the Concordat and the HR Excellence Award mirrors something called the European Charter and Code, which many institutions in Ireland and in, you know, across the rest of Europe hold. And there are plans to review that, so that will be happening this year. So again, it's a great opportunity for us to think about what do we need to do at a researcher, certainly a postgraduate researcher level, what building blocks do we need to instill academic leadership and leadership in general across our research population. I quickly mentioned the Concordat already, so as I say, we lead on behalf of government here. It's an agreement between funders and the institutions, so and it's a great way of us ensuring that the researchers are valued. So final couple of slides, and we're in the home straight. So what can aspiring leaders learn? And there's probably a lot to learn from higher education in general about leadership. I think there's a tendency in every sector, whether you're in the health industry or whether you're in the railways or space, every sector believes that their culture and leadership are unique, and I think that's, well, it's just not true. There are common threads that run across. A leader is a leader, and what makes a good leader and how you instill the attitude and behaviours of good leadership are the same in every sector. Yes, there's a context that needs to be a wrapper that goes around that. But I think, in terms of what can aspiring leaders learn, career planning is essential. Nothing happens by chance. You need to plan your career and your development in the same way that you would plan your research and your activity, your work. And you need to work with others, and that might be other organisations like the Royal Society of Chemistry, or that that are there invested in your professional development, or it might be others within your company, your institution. And if you build your network and your profile, then some of these things will follow. There's a real emphasis within higher education looking at health and well-being at the moment. I don't know if some of you will have seen the research that came out last year with 1 in 3 postgraduate researchers in Flanders in Belgium showing strong indication of mental health problems. And certainly we've been working very closely with Research England to do some pilots in higher education, looking specifically at the postgraduate research experience. Postgraduates in particular don't self-identify as students, and they're not staff. So there are unique challenges around higher education and how you achieve that work-life balance. And I think mentoring and role models are essential in every sector. Whoever you are and whatever stage you're in of your career, the mentoring is a support that everyone should take advantage of. And certainly the RSC mentoring scheme is fantastic, and I'd recommend everybody to have a look at either formal or informal and looking at role models. So who do you admire? How can you, what are the things that you admire about them as a leader? And these are some of the things that we did some research with the Leadership Foundation for Higher Education Efficiency Change, looking at what were the common threads across different leaderships and sectors. And then finally, just a quick last couple of slides about where research staff go. And actually, we're not tapping into that pool of people who were postdocs, who are now 5 years beyond their postdoc experience. So we did a big piece of research in 2016, as you can see, working in collaboration with lots of organisations across Europe to look at where people go beyond that research staff experience. Many of them are still involved in the research system, so they may be in higher education driving research strategy or teaching and learning strategy, but they're in a wide range of occupations. About 3/4 of them had left academia looking for better long-term employment, better job security. Interestingly, women are more likely to be looking for a better work-life balance than men. And one area which we're doing some further work on is that in that transition beyond academia, so looking for opportunities beyond academia, that loss of academic identity, and if you take it back to that 80% of people aspiring to an academic position, that long held ambition not being realized, there is something in that we as a community need to talk more openly about. That if you go beyond academia, you're not a failed academic, that you've made a decision to go beyond academia and look at the different opportunities that are out there, and somehow we need to break down this myth that this is some kind of a failure. 80%, as I mentioned, of the research staff wanted to become an academic, but actually 5 years outside of academia or beyond academia, only 18% would go back. And 80% feel that they're drawing on capabilities and experience that they gained whilst they were doing their research staff contracts in their current job, some or most of the time. So it is not wasted. The things that you learn as you go through your higher education career is not wasted. And that 4/5 were satisfied with the jobs that they'd got and that they had. So I hope, Mario, I haven't spoken for too long.
No, that's perfect.
But it's, if people have questions, I'm really happy if you have, things that you feel that might be a little bit more personal that you wanted to email directly to me. I'm really happy to chat to people individually, but I welcome questions on the sort of some of the content that I've covered.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. Really great presentation. Really interesting, and some really interesting statistics there. So we're going to open this out. We've got some time. Open this out to people on the webinar for questions. So do type in questions, and I will ask Claire those for you. So firstly, Claire, while people are typing, I've got one or two questions. So you mentioned confidence. How do academic researchers increase their confidence so that they can actually have the confidence to actually go and apply and actually get jobs in other non-academic areas?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think self-awareness and a high level of emotional intelligence, so understanding why you might be feeling that lack of confidence, is really important. I think researchers are extremely intelligent, highly capable individuals. They can also be very self-critical.
Sure.
And I think that self-critical analytical approach is what makes them a good researcher, but the downside or the possible negative to that might be that they are constantly analyzing, and it may manifest itself as a lack of confidence. So I mean, I think that getting different experiences, being intellectually mobile, going to conferences, pushing yourself out there, networking, trying to understand what potential job roles, opportunities there are out there by going and talking to people, and that will give you more confidence that actually the things that you think might be the case or might be true probably aren't. So sure. I think it's encouraging, and I think I haven't really touched on the role of supervisors and PIs in leadership. Yeah. But I think they can be hugely important role models to young researchers, early career researchers or early stage researchers. And there are schools of thought that they are gatekeepers as well. So, your PI and your supervisor is invested and conflicted in some ways. So you shouldn't just get your career and employment advice and your professional development advice from your supervisor. You need to be tapping into all the different resources, all of the different activities that are on campus or through the Royal Society of Chemistry or through all of the different other networks that are out there, because, you know, you need a balanced view of your skills. I think I just wanted to touch on, Sarah had asked a question around the 40 career stories. Actually, we've got loads of career stories on our website. And yeah, if you go into the vitae.ac.uk, I'm not sure which institution or which company you're at, Sarah, but have a if you go to the what do research staff do next, there's a whole career story section there, and it looks at all of the, you know, possible careers, paths and routes that those particular researchers took. So just to pick up on your question, and then Mario, did you want to, another question has come in from Andy?
Yeah, sure. This is really interesting, a really interesting question. It touches upon something that I was going to mention in terms of mentoring and the importance of mentoring in order to try and build your confidence. So Andy has asked that he is currently mentoring a PhD in Cameroon, and in essence, he wants to ask, what advice would you give him with progressing his academic career in his particular country?
Yeah, this is one, I mean, some of the work that we've done in Africa, very often the researchers are really hungry for information about how to get published. And there are publishing related charities that do courses and do sort of support. So I don't know whether, Andy, whether your researcher is specifically looking for your feedback on papers or things like that, and you may or may not feel comfortable giving that, but there are, I'll dig out the link to the charity that does the publishing support, but it is a big, obviously a big challenge for all researchers, because the way that you're measured is through the impact that your journal, your articles and the impact factors and all of the impact that goes around that. So
sure, brilliant, thank you, Claire. There's another question that's come through from Mohammed. Can you elaborate further on developing engagement in enterprise management and how agility, or I think that means also mobility, can be impeded?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at an event at the House of Commons a couple of weeks ago with the Enterprise Fellows from the Royal Academy of Engineering and the Royal Society of Edinburgh, with the new Chief Executive of UKRI. And yeah, this is, so in terms of enterprise, we have an enterprise lens. So I would encourage Mohammed to have a look on our website and find the enterprise lens. Those are the particular attributes that you should focus on if this is something that you're interested in. An enterprise mindset, and I've been having some conversations with some big employers about what does that mean? What is an enterprise mindset? And I think what it means when we start to dig a little bit deeper is that it's about business acumen and commercialization. So how do you take ideas and translate them? And you know, many universities and institutions do have courses and resources around these areas. So go and try and tap into them. And, you know, again, the enterprise lens is a good place to start, but it's, you know, I think universities are supporting researchers, they just don't always know where to look.
Excellent. So we've got another question, which I will take as the final question, because it is 1:30, from Paul. Do you believe that many researchers find it challenging to make the transition from the freedom of thought that you get in academia to the more regulated or consensus nature of thinking in industry? I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Not quite sure I would agree with the latter, but
Yeah.
but over to you, Claire.
That's a really, yeah, and I've had this debate a few times now when I've spoken to large groups of researchers. No, I think so. I think there are employers out there that value that, obviously, that freedom of thought. So if you're talking about intellectual stimulation, the opportunity to think freely, then actually there are lots of employers out there. There are fun things to do with your research, and fun research to be done, whether it's in higher education or in industry. I think the perception is that perhaps in industry, because you're driving the bottom line, that somehow that's constraining. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think if you want to look at a future employee, you need to look at their values and understand your values, and then you align them.
Really, really good point there. Really like that in terms of aligning values. Thank you, Claire, and thank you so much for giving your presentation, for taking time with the questions. We'll stop there, and by all means, everybody who's still around, do contact Claire. Her details are on the final slide there, and really, I really would urge you to go and look at the researcher development framework if you haven't done that already. I know certainly with some of the work that I do with researchers in universities, not everybody takes the time to actually look at that. So I would urge you to look at that. So thank you very much, Claire.
Thank you.
And
well
thank
done,
you
Steph.
for listening. And we will leave you, and thank you very much.